evening, everyone. How are you feeling today? I hope you're excited for this one more session of our Future of Capitalism. Welcome again. Thanks for being here with us. I will start introducing so we do not start so late, and while our colleagues join us as well. And I see that they're joining more and more. Namshi, if you want to continue, please, on the slides. You already know me. I'm Fernanda Corsi. I am the Executive Director for the Institute for Sustainability Leadership at IESE. And this year, I'm being your MC here at Future of Capitalism, replacing our dear Junichi Kagawa. We'll go very fast through house rules, which most of you already know. And I just continue to ask you to please rename yourself as displayed on my screen, on your screen right now, as your affiliated school. Underline your name and last name, please. This is much easier for us to keep tracking as well the participants per school. So it's really helpful and and as well keep us all engaged with which one is speaking when we have the breakout sessions and our discussions. And also, please mute your microphones, but keep your camera on, please. It will be great to see your faces. And I know in some places it's very late or some other places are very early, but see if you can try to stay with your cameras on, that would be fantastic. Nanji? Last session we had our dear Vincent Stanley from Patagonia, the director of philosophy, and also visiting fellow from Yale School of Management, on a great discussion with Professor Fabrizio Ferraro, who is also the academic director of the Institute for Sustainability Leadership with me here at IESE, and a professor of Strategic Management Department. And we had the facilitation of Professor Roger Levermore, the Senior Strategy Advisor, former Dean and Vice President at the Asian Institute of Technology in Thailand. And for the ones who were here or the ones who were not here, we're going to share very brief insights from last session. Please, Nanji. I will read this slide, usually because it's very hard for me to keep all these insights in my mind. So the first point is, it is key to integrate the company's core ethics into everyday operations, and it is important to prepare future generations to face environmental degradation and social inequality, and how businesses can act responsibly to prevent further harm. Saying that businesses actively engage in efforts that regenerate the planet and human communities for the future, even when facing short-term financial challenges. And while stakeholder theory and sustainability have been part of business discussions since the 1980s, integrating these ideas into a strategy has been difficult due to a focus on maximizing shareholder value. And we've been speaking a lot about this within this course, shareholder value versus stakeholder engagement. And business schools have begun to incorporate sustainability, but many still prioritize competition and corporate performance over the long-term collaboration. And the third one, there has been a shift in attitudes among students towards sustainability and social responsibility, with many showing interest, but also struggling with the slow pace of changing in business practices. A major challenge today is balancing traditional corporate strategies with the need to address systemic issues like climate change and move toward more collaborative and sustainable approaches. So we had Professor Fabrizio Ferraro and Vincent really collaborating and sharing the idea of new ways of teaching business, different business models, and Fabrizio addressing how business schools are addressing them. And today we have Luis here with us. Luis Keller-Roper. Luis is a leader in regenerative and transformative businesses, people, and education at Volans. She leads the team and is responsible for Volans' mission, programs, and strategies, and ensures that Volans has the biggest positive impact. She studied at the University of Oxford and has worked at the frontier of innovation, is starting her career in the tech industry before successfully launching, running, and advising cradle to cradle and circular economy brands across Europe. Passionate about empowering the next generation of regenerators, Louise is a big mentor through Aspire, chair of the University of Exeter Business School's Board of International Advisors and lectures at Cranfield University's Center for Design, Innovation, and Sustainability. And she is also on the advisory board of the Global CO2 Initiative, the Sustainable Finance Center, the UKRI Interdisciplinary Center for Circular Chemical Economy, and the Good Growth Company. What a incredible curriculum. I'm pretty sure that all of us can learn a lot from you today, Louise. So please come on the stage to introduce our speakers today. And I hope you all have a great session. I'm very excited for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Fernanda. Thank you, everybody, for turning up. I do think we have a wonderful session planned for you. It sounds like it comes straight off last week's, which of course is wonderful. So building on that foundation, really we're at this interesting juncture where the way business defines and delivers value is clearly no longer suitable for the people, for planet, or for the future. The idea that profit alone equals success has brought us to this place. I think we should go to the next slide. I think there are some things, and maybe one more time even. This session is really a chance to explore what true corporate value creation could look like in this century and the next, with two amazing leaders who have been at the forefront of that redefinition. We'll start with Pavan Sukhdev with his work on the corporation, his book, Corporation 2020 and Valuing Nature and Economics, and then Fabio Barbosa from Natura, who has also been committed to this agenda throughout his career, and now with his leadership of Natura. And together, I think today we will ask, and they will help us ask, how companies create value, but also for whom, how, and what is the final purpose of that. So first of all, I am thrilled to introduce Pavan Sukhdev. He's been a friend of our founder, John Elkington, for a long time. Pavan is a scientist by education, an international banker by training, and importantly, an environmental economist by passion. He is the former president and chair of WWF International, has served on the boards of Conservation International, the Global Reporting Initiative, the Stockholm Resilience Center, and the TEEB Advisory Board, the Economics of Ecosystems and Biodiversity for the UN. He's also led the UN's Green Economy Initiative. And Pavan's work has been recognized through several awards, including the McCluskey Fellowship by Yale University, where he taught a graduate course on TEEB, or the Economics of Ecosystem and Biodiversity, and wrote his book, Corporation 2020, Transforming Business for Tomorrow's World, which I think 3 chapters were part of your pre-read. Pavan has also been awarded the Blue Planet Prize, the Tyler Prize, and most recently, the AEERE Prize, the European Practitioner Achievement Award in Implying Environmental Economics. So that was last year. And really that speaks to his work as founder and CEO of GIST Impact, where he works with corporates and investors to harness that power of impact economics and technology he's built over the years to really discover how business's full value could contribute to the world. So it's safe to say Pavan's work has significantly influenced the integration of environmental and social considerations into economics and also practical on business practices. An amazing background, Pavan. And I'm really excited because actually in a couple of weeks' time, I think your team from GIST is coming into my team, so everybody can get a demo of the platform. And I'm hoping to hear more about that. But for now, welcome. And I would love to invite you to say some words, and then we will have some questions and answers after. Is that okay?
Sure thing, yes. I think I'll talk a bit about some of the themes that I've prepared a presentation, which is really a collection of images. I'll use that to talk about some of the themes that you brought up, which is about using ethics in our discourse on corporate performance, actually being able to redefine corporate performance. You talked about not just shareholder value, but stakeholder value. And yes, there's an element of that in my conversation. And the four capitals that are one of the ways in which you can measure value more holistically and therefore, in a sense, redefine performance more holistically. I'm also honored and delighted that I'm sharing the podium here with Fabio, a man whom I have deeply admired since the days that I wrote Corporation 2020. In fact, Natura is mentioned in Corporation 2020 as an example, as a case study. And I'll say a few words about it, but I'm sure you will learn a lot more about Natura from Fabio directly. You mentioned TEEB, the Economics of Ecosystems and Biodiversity, Louise, and actually it's a pleasure for me as the study leader of the TEEB project, which was actually between 2008 2010. We wrote a set of 4 reports for the G8+5 initiative, and they occupied pride of place in what was known as COP10, the 10th Conference of Parties of the Convention on Biological Diversity. So COP10 was when we launched TEEB. The use of TEEB in both agriculture through the so-called TEEB for Agriculture and Food is really heartwarming. And I welcome questions on that or comments. And the use of TEEB for TNFD is implicit in the sense that TEEB led to the so-called TEEB for Business Coalition, which then got rebranded as the Natural Capital Coalition, which then created the so-called Natural Capital Protocol in 2016, which has been a key contributor into the frameworks and approach that you see in TNFD. But I think what's not widely known is that, in fact, the language of impacts and externalities also is contributed to by both TEEB as well as Corporation 2020. Very often people ask me, and I'll just use one example, which is not part of my presentation, but I'll mention, what is a sustainable corporation? It's so difficult. I say, no, it's so easy to understand what is a sustainable corporation. Today's corporation measures its performance in just one dimension, which is financial performance. But what if it measured performance in 4 dimensions, 4 different dimensions? Impacts on financial capital, already done. Impacts on human capital, including the knowledge, skills, and health of employees. Impacts on natural capital, which is hugely important given climate change and biodiversity loss and so on. And lastly, impacts on social capital, which is how is it affecting the relationship fabric of the societies in which it buys and sells goods and services. And if these impacts, all 4 impacts are plus, 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 as against being plus, plus, minus, minus, or minus, 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 plus, if it's plus, 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 then it doesn't matter whether there's one of that corporation or 10 of them or even 10,000 of them, because with plus, 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 plus impacts, the world is a better place.
Yes.
And that's a sustainable corporation, one which has positive impacts on natural, human, produced, and social capital. Simple.
Did you want to share slides?
Yes, I will share slides now.
Good. I think that's a really great setup for the rest of the. There we go. Some wonderful
share
slides.
Screen, yeah. And so this is, I'm just doing this as a quick revision because I know that you guys would have read the prescribed reading, but just a quick update on what the science is telling us, because the planetary boundaries science has actually been updated twice since 2010, again in 2015, again in 2023. And the news seems to get worse and worse every time the science is updated. So what I'm describing to you is actually based on the latest science, but also goes back to some of the externalities that were calculated. Now, this study was actually commissioned by me, as it happens, when I was the vice chair of the Natural Capital Coalition, and it was commissioned by and done for us by Trucost, who is actually a competitor, and now they're part of S&P. So we are still friendly with them, and as you can see, I still name them in my citations. So this study was basically a sector-wise study of externalities, valuing the externalities, and it found that coal-fired power generation, because of the climate impacts, that is the GAG is the green bars. And the numbers here, I'm sorry, they're very small, but they're all in billions. So you're looking at $450 billion of negative impacts of the coal-fired power sector in Eastern Asia. The third highest is coal-fired power sector in North America, which is mainly in the US. And you can see that today the US, these numbers date back to 2013. In fact, a lot of them are 2010, 12. But you can see that, in fact, today the coal-fired power sector in the US has gone down to 20% of or 19% of the total energy grid. But the impacts are massive. And you can see the two colors of the bars. Green is the greenhouse gas impacts estimated through the Stern Review costs of climate change, and the red bars, which is basically air pollution costs. Because please remember that the biggest negative impact of coal-fired power, indeed fossil fuel power, is actually the SOx, NOx, PM2.5, PM10 particles that are emitted out, which are causing respiratory and cardiovascular diseases. And yes, it is possible to calculate what is the health cost of that in terms of the actual medical treatment costs, in terms of disability adjusted life years, and in terms of lost livelihoods as a result of early death. Premature death happening while you're still working means that you lose, or your family loses, future incomes. All this can be estimated through calculations, and that's what's been done here. And the surprising one here is number 2. I know people will need to have very sharp eyesight, but what it says is cattle ranching in South America. And that's the number 2. And a lot of that is basically brown, which is land use change. So this is essentially the destruction of rainforests in Brazil and other parts of Latin America to generate land for cattle ranching. And it's huge. And of course, there's also some greenhouse gas emissions from there. And then there are others, which is wheat and rice farming in Asia, where, again, the complexion of the impacts changes. Here, the impacts are not greenhouse gases and air pollution, but rather they are water and water and land use change mainly, as well as, of course, land and water pollution due to the use of chemical pesticides and fertilizers. So as you can see, some of the biggest impacts of the corporate sector are actually quite different in terms of their composition as you go from sector to sector. Now, what does this have to do with planetary boundaries? Everything. Because the reality is this, that basically corporate pressures are what is driving our inexorable march towards planetary boundaries. And I'm just highlighting just for the color coding, you can see that is the planetary boundaries diagram. That's the latest one, the 2023, where if I were to do this in 2010, I would only show 3 boundaries as being in high risk. But now we are talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boundaries. And in fact, some of them are not past the danger zone, but they are in the danger zone. So total 9 out of the 10 planetary boundaries are already exhibiting some degree of potential risk. And this is not good news, but look at what's causing them. 2/3 of the economy, my friends, is private sector. And so also are 2/3 of the impacts that are driving us inexorably towards these planetary boundaries. And what impacts, you might ask? Guess what? It's exactly the same ones as the diagram on the left-hand side, which is greenhouse gas emissions, land use, water abstraction, land and water pollutants, and air pollution. So I've shown on the planetary boundaries which are the corporate drivers that are causing that particular boundary to exceed its limits, its so-called safe operating space, as Johan Rockström calls it. And it's in the case of climate change, obviously greenhouse gases, but biosphere integrity, land use change, but also increasingly nowadays greenhouse gases. The main reason why Amazon rainforest is dying back today is no longer due to deforestation, due to cattle ranching and so on, but actually it's because of precipitation losses as a result of the climate change. So when we focus nowadays, and please remember, there's a lot of focus on nature positive, and I'm myself a great supporter of that. But nature positive and not being nature negative is not just about the direct impacts of mining, forestry, agriculture, infrastructure development, and maybe a bit of bad tourism. These are the 5 sectors. If you look at these 5 sectors in any major portfolio today, they will be probably 2% or 3% of the portfolio. Out of the S&P 500, these sectors are only 2.1%, for example. That's not the important thing. The important thing is the indirect impacts on nature. The indirect impacts, that is the water usage and mostly the greenhouse gas emissions causing rainforest losses and so on and so forth due to precipitation losses and temperature effects. These are the big monsters that we have unleashed. And when people tell me, oh, but there's not enough data, what do we do? What do we do? I start laughing, and sometimes I should start crying, because actually they are publishing all the data already in their GRI reports, sometimes in their sustainability reports. I'm saying, look, all you need to do is to convert that data into impact numbers, then you'll understand what is your real impact on nature. Figure out how much of the greenhouse gas emissions impacts as causing the rainforest loss. Figure out, and there's ways of doing it. There's a lot of science. There are different models. There's RECIPE, RECIPE, and there's life cycle impact, LCI. So there are several life cycle impact models which are available today, and huge amount of research, really amazing research and fantastic modeling can be worked out. And you know what? All you need to know is the stuff that you already are publishing in your sustainability reports. So your nature impacts, my friends, is hiding in broad daylight. It's sitting there. You're just not putting the numbers into the calculator to work out what the nature impact is, and you can do it. And we help companies by doing it for them, actually. And in fact, nowadays we started giving it for free because we're saying that's like it's just a pain trying to sell this. Just give the company its own impacts, and then let's see if it's interested in working out something. If companies are interested in changing their today's situation, which is what you see on this slide, then they'll come and say, okay, how do we compare with our competitors? Then we've got a conversation. So now I want to go to, I'm trying to respect, Louise, the 50 minutes that I've been given. And if I'm being a bit too fast, please alert me because I'm happy to slow down, but I kind of don't want to because I want to address this question next. And most of the talk, my conversation, my 50 minutes today is about this actually, which is about what can today's corporation, which is 2/3 of the economy, is driving it, and you've seen how badly and in what dimensions and blah. You've seen all that. But the point is, can it change? Can today's corporation, can it actually become a solution to the problem rather than a cause of the problem? And my answer to you is a firm yes. Yes, it can. Now, the question is, it's not as easy as just saying yes. You have to do a lot of things. So first thing is, okay, when we say, can today's corporation deliver tomorrow's economy? The first question is, okay, what is tomorrow's economy? And to me, that is an inclusive green economy. And the work that I'm sharing here, which was the results of a study called the Green Economy Reports Towards a Green Economy, that was by UNEP as far back as 2011. So I was privileged to be the leader of that report. But the key conclusion is on the slide on the right-hand side, which is that it takes no more than 2% of GDP being invested differently. Okay, this is not about philanthropy. This is not about funding from a sort of social conscience perspective or doing CSR. This is about investing in things differently. In other words, instead of investing more money in fossil fuels, exploration and exploitation, invest in renewable energies. Instead of investing in old technologies, invest in energy efficiency and resource efficiency, and so on. Instead of investing in unsustainable forestry, invest in sustainable forest. Instead of investing in chemical farming, invest in natural farming, etc., etc., etc. So this is about different investments. Please note, this is not philanthropy. This is not gifts for sustainability. This is just a different investment strategy. And if we did that and invested 2% of GDP, which is basically about 10% of gross capital formation, here's what you would see. You would see, yes, an initial dip in real GDP. This is per capita and GDP per capita, the second column. But after that, you'd see an increase. So GDP would grow because value addition is happening, but differently, not in the way that you're doing it, but in a different way. Then look at what happens on energy demand. The energy demand drops because of energy efficiency and resource efficiency. Goes down. This is over 3 horizons. It's talking about a report done in 2010. So 5-year horizon, a 20-year horizon, and a 40-year horizon. These are the changes you would see over those 3 horizons. A 20 and then 40% drop over the 20 and 40 years. 13 and 22% drop in water demand. Forest land per capita increasing. No surprises, right? Because it's a regenerative economy. Footprint, and this is the most important one, the last column. Footprint going down because of a transition to a green economy, 8%, 22%, 48%. Halving the footprint, the so-called ecological footprint. Isn't that amazing? This is all modeled on the basis of the T21 model, which is a system dynamic model, which is very well known and very well published. We have opened our research, I'm talking about we as a United Nations Environment Program, opened our research and the calculations of that model for everyone to see. And not a single economist has come back with a criticism of that. So it's not that it can't be done. The proof is sitting here. It's been sitting here in the open, again, hidden in broad daylight, as I keep saying, for the last 14 years. 2011 is when we published this report. So what do we need? Clearly, just having the information of a different way of working the economy and a different way of investing is clearly not alone going to save this planet's surface. But can today's policies perhaps be changed? And that's when you begin to get interesting results. The answer is yes. So today we have a focus on policy which doesn't necessarily focus on explicitly the corporation as the driver of the problem. But you need to. Why? For this reason. Because if we look at GVA, and this is for the US, which is even more extreme, the average corporate component of the economy is about 2/3, about 62 odd percent. If we look at the US gross value added, or if we look at, for that matter, household employment, the answers are 74 and 75%. In this case, GVAs, I'm showing you how much is the different sectors. Private businesses, the green segment is nonprofits, households 7%, and government 12.5%. 75% is the private sector. This is the economy. It's a private sector economy. Why are we constantly making policy pretending as if it's not the private sector whose actions we are trying to change? And if we do nothing, here's what happens. And this is an example of the science. Like today, I've showed you the science of planetary boundaries, and I've showed you the economics of a green economy transition towards an inclusive green economy. So the science is there. Here's what happens when we ignore the science, and look how long it continues. The issue with cigarettes was highlighted by a report to the US Surgeon General in 1936. And it clearly drew the connection between cigarettes and cancer at that time. 1936 is 90 years ago, by the way. But it took something like 60 years for rules to start reflecting that. And it began with advertising and how you advertising cigarette smoking and injurious to health, or is it actually causes death, and graphic images and so on and so forth. So it took 60 odd years for policy to start changing. And all that's changed is not the policy on cigarettes, but it's the policies on cigarette advertising. But at least that's a start. Leaded gasoline was discovered both at Harvard, and its damages to the neurological system was discovered by both medical researchers in Yale and Harvard in 1919 and 1920, independently, both working on the same problem. When did we finally get leaded gasoline out of the cars? 1980s. Fossil fuels, we've known, I mean, Exxon's researchers themselves had proved to Exxon's board in late 1970 and early 1980s that yes, there is an impact of greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. It's been known to the oil companies and to society. Al Gore has been writing about it since 1984 and so on. Glyphosates and the problems of cancer, the toxicity of glyphosates and the cancer risk have been talked about since the 1990s. Bisphenols since the 2000s. Tailing dam wastes and how significant they are as a cost to human health and society has been going on. And we've had companies, one company in Brazil, 3 times they've had tailing dam bursts as a result of excessive mining due to the prices of iron ore going up at various times in history. So these are issues, 1980s, 1990s, 2000s, 1990s. They still haven't, no action at all taken as yet on any of these issues. And that's the problem, right? So policy responses tend to take decades, and there's no reason other than just the lack of bite of policy, because corporate lobbying has been diffusing that bite and preventing it from happening. And this is an example of that, where we see corporations actually working in the opposite direction. Volkswagen is a well-known case where the company installed software which worked differently when it recognized that it was under test conditions as against driving conditions. It would drive and emit a huge amount of emissions, but when it was put under test conditions, which is at a constant speed and so on and so forth, the software would recognize that and immediately make changes so that its emissions were lower. So this faking of emissions tests was going on, and it became an industry standard. Amazing, right? So this is how a major car maker reacted. And then, of course, ExxonMobil has spent more than $30 million. I've written about this, so I can repeat that. And it's horribly proven $30 million on basically obfuscating and negating the science of climate change. This is a cartoon which illustrates that point. And so have other companies, but I just pick Exxon because they're the most visible and the largest and the most powerful of the lot. And we've had the issues with Samarco in Brazil. This was the Rio Doce. I actually visited that in 2016. I visited the site. It was like, I had tears in my eyes because it was just the sheer devastation that was caused as a result of the tailing dam burst in Samarco. The loss of lives, yes, people, there was literally like a flood of mud coming out because remember these earthen dams are made of mud, right? So if they have too much mining, then there'll be too much buildup of the residue, and that leads to the mud wall basically breaking. And this happened twice, not just then, but again, it happened in 2015 in Bento Rodriguez. And these are the two images of the before and after. Like you can see, this is from a satellite. You can see what the land looks like before and after the burst, just flipping from one to the other. So you see the dramatic nature of that. This is the NASA Earth Observatory. I'm not sure if we'll get images like this anymore because of budget cuts and so on NASA. But we have this. And this is sadly a picture I took there when I was there. This tells you like how devastating it was. Can you imagine an entire town covered with a sea of mud like this? And this is not by me. This is Bento. I haven't been there, but yeah. So we have today what I call a Corporation 1920 model, and those of you who read the book will know the origin of that story. We are pursuing size. We work on the basis that big is beautiful. It's all about profits. How do you increase profits? Increase volume. And hopefully the spreads don't decline too much so long as you increase volume. So basically it's about turnover. Increase the turnover to increase profits. And that's the model that's followed. So therefore everything, marketing, advertising, financing, these are the two engines that drive the economy. Marketing and advertising on the one side, finance on the other. They are geared towards creating a bigger corporation which sells more to people so that it can get more profits. So that's the basic model that we have. It's the pursuit of size. The other dimension of today's model is too big to fail, right? So we've had many instances of this. You have insurance companies like AIG and car companies like General Motors being basically rescued by government money, which means your money, your taxes and my taxes, rescuing big companies as if they're kind of like Mother Teresa NGOs that need help. They're poor little things, so innocent and so fragile. That's nonsense. I mean, markets punish the misallocation of capital. If companies have misallocated capital, please allow capitalism to work. Let the markets punish that misallocation. Let them die so that they can be replaced, hopefully, by other companies which are better managed and able to do better in a time of volatility and change. But no, we will basically allow leverage to enable growth beyond sizes that are commercially viable. And then when the problem happens, we rescue them. A classic case of going on again. And then, of course, lobbying. And there are like so many instances of corporate lobbying to tilt the playing field, to prevent competition from coming in, to buy up small companies who have different ideas and better ideas, and sometimes even shut them down after buying them. All this happens. Basically, very much an influence game played by corporate lobbyists. And lastly, about advertising. And today's advertising and marketing is all about playing on our human insecurities and converting them into wants, converting the wants into needs, converting the insecurity into needs and needs into wants into demand, and demand into production and profits. So it's that thing of, like using the fear of, you only have a GM car, or the MD next door has a BMW, or the MD next door has some bigger, better car or whatever, so you must buy another car. No, there's no need to do any of that. But the psychology of advertising is to play on those fears, on those insecurities of the human psyche, and then convert them into needs, wants, demand. And they claim to be ethically neutral. I'm sorry, guys, but I don't understand the term ethically neutral. I think there's only either ethical or unethical, right? So I don't understand ethically neutral. But that's what that's what advertising companies claim. They say, no, it's the advertiser. the corporation that is asking us to do this. We are just designing the ads, the strategy and the ads and the placement and the media placement and so on. That's rubbish. You are participating in, aiding and abetting the problem, and in fact, making it worse. But what we need is the other kind of cooperation, which you read about, Cooperation 2020. And I'm going to give some examples of what this means. The first thing, it's got to be value-driven, right? So it can't just be profit-driven. It has to be value-driven, and means recognizing value beyond financial capital value, which is there. I'm not saying stop making profits. I'm saying make profits, but also add to human capital, social capital, and natural capital, and don't subtract. This whole idea that you can be plus and minus, minus, minus means that you are creating the circumstances for unsustainability or lack of sustainability, because you are destroying human capital. That's human health, and typically, and you are destroying natural capital, and you're destroying social capital, which is the bonds that hold society and make it work. So the idea of the stakeholder capitalism, as I called it, is to have a corporation that creates profits, and it should, because it's servicing an investment, but it should also create human, social, and natural capital, not just create financial capital. That's stakeholder capitalism. Then another idea that I build into Cooperation 2020, which you've seen, is the idea of a corporation as a custodian of nature. In other words, protecting and taking direct action with and conserving natural capital by reducing its natural capital impacts. Measure and then manage those natural capital impacts. And the third dimension is cooperation as a community, and I will give examples of this. How do you build communities, not just with the employees, but with the suppliers, with the buyers, with the communities in which you operate, and so on? And yes, I'll be happy to take questions anytime, but I'm going to wait for the moderator to prompt me on when I should do so. And lastly, about developing human capital, because every company which is a good company will be training its employees. And this, by the way, is already happening, right? So there are a couple of things which are kind of already happening, that companies do train staff. So by training staff and enabling them to earn higher incomes over time, enabling them to grow in their careers, it is actually adding human capital, because the present value of your future incomes keeps increasing as you get better trained by your company, and as you learn from your colleagues and your superiors, and also as you get trained in technical aspects, maybe through third-party education programs and so on. So all of this is already happening, but unfortunately what isn't happening is enough on the stakeholder capitalism side, measuring the performance holistically and managing it. Definitely not enough on the natural capital side, because you can still see the huge increase in greenhouse gas emissions and nature losses and so on. And not enough, even though there are good CSR programs and there are good social practices and policies that are instituted by companies, not enough on the social capital side. So I would say today's capital is typically, I'm not saying always, typically plus on the financial and human capital side, but typically minus on the social and natural capital side. And you can't run like that, because you can't destroy society and you can't destroy nature forever. So that's the cause of our fundamental economic misdesign. So that's the result of our fundamental economic misdesign, where the agent of the economy, the biggest agent of the economy, is the corporation. The biggest agent is actually encouraged to go ahead and have negative externalities and create cost to nature and cost to society, whilst developing human capital nicely, and it does that, and developing financial capital nicely, and it does that too.
Wonderful. Oh,
So theory of change is, what do we do? So this is the explaining the problem and the direction we want to move in. Theory of change, and if this is kind of my one slide summary of the entire book, there are basically four macro issues there's excessive demand, which is of course driven as I've explained by marketing. There's underpriced supply, because we allow the real costs of leverage not to be reflected, and we allow prices of resources. Yvon Chouinard, who is the Patagonia founder, launched my book at Yale University. And when he came, he said something beautiful. He says, everything manufactured is sold at a price cheaper than its cost. Reflect that sentence. Everything manufactured is sold at a price cheaper than its cost. You might think, hang on, that means everyone's making a loss? No, it doesn't mean everyone's making a loss. Actually, everyone's internalizing the profits and externalizing the costs. Externalities, yet again, right? That's Yvon Chouinard. Actual comment that he made, which I still remember because I was sitting 2 feet away from him, at the launch of Corporation 2020 at Yale University. Resource depletion also drives underpriced supply, and that basically about underpricing resources. And of course, public capital losses. When I say public capital, I'm referring to human capital belonging to lots of people other than you and your employees. Human capital, natural capital, and social capital. These are kind of the public capitals because they belong to other people, not just the corporation and its direct. So these are the micro drivers of those macro issues of excessive demand, underpriced supply, resource depletion, and public capital losses. And beautifully, there is a solution to each one of those already. You have advertising associations which are solving these problems. You have central banking limits. You have capital constraints. You have all kinds of ways in which you can control leverage. Not being done enough, but it can be done. You have resource taxation. In Norway, for instance, taxes resources, 79% tax on the oil that is drilled. Thanks to that, you have the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, today worth $1.7 trillion, right? Making every Norwegian pretty much a millionaire. So and you can resource tax, and I still remember when I interviewed Erik Solheim, who was then the Minister for Environment and Development for Corporation 2020. The interview is there somewhere. I asked him a very pointed question. I said, look, Erik, you've been taxing the oil companies at 79%. Isn't that a recipe for disaster? Won't they just go away? He says, oh, yeah, they complain. They've been complaining for the last 25 years, but they're still here. So that was his answer to my question. And lastly, externalities disclosure. Now it's finally moving in that direction. I'm so pleased to see that because I wouldn't have thought, even though I wrote the book, I wouldn't have thought that this would happen before the other three things. But yes, we are moving in that direction. And here's an example from Patagonia. Don't buy this jacket. This is on, he did this advertisement full page, and I think in New York Times and a couple of other, don't buy the jacket on Black Friday. Why? Because here are footprints. It's worked out the product footprint of this in terms of, and he says, instead of buying this jacket, you could reduce it and get repairs done, and you could reuse your old jacket, you could bring it back and you could trade it in. It actually shows things you can do instead of just buying a new jacket. These things that you can do as a customer of Patagonia. It's quite an amazing ad.
I want to make sure we have time for
questions. Yes. So I think these are key things that I wanted to mention, but I mean, just, we can give examples. Infosys, a company in India, which trains 30,000 employees and recognizes the value of human capital. And we calculated that, my company calculated that. It's huge, absolutely billions of dollars in its Mysore training center. Natura, which you'll hear a lot more about, creates economic security for women as a result of having in those days, more than 1.5 million housewives going around and becoming their agents effectively for selling to their neighbors and their communities. And you have a lot of this already happening. So they're good examples, but I'll stop now and pause for questions.
Thank you. I have a lot of questions, but I'm sure that the audience has a lot of questions. There we go. We're already off. Dapo, do you want to start?
Sorry, could you unmute yourself, please? Yeah. We can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Pavan. I really did enjoy your talk. Forces me to think, but here I want to play a bit of a devil's advocate. I hope you don't mind.
Please do. Yes.
All right, thank you. Okay.
Even the devil needs advocates, and of course others do as well. That's right.
That's so funny. Okay, so my question, a couple of things just running through my mind, but first and foremost is this. I see the impact, the data is there from my personal research. Contribution to green emission and all that from fossil fuel is it's considered about 75% of it, right? There are smaller ones like even cattle grazing. We don't talk about it, but it's something.
Yes. No, but by the way, sorry, the impact numbers, so they're different estimates, right? But the ones that I'd go with, and our own estimate of impacts and how much is greenhouse gas emissions versus all of the others, it's roughly half and half. And that's actually pretty close to the number. That was the same conclusion of True Cost way back. So our estimates are more recent. They're kind of 2023 based. and they were roughly 48% or thereabouts was GHG emissions. So you can say that as a ballpark, I would prefer if you used half and half, as in half is greenhouse gas emissions, and the other half is all of the, including cattle grazing, which is huge, right? Impacts of that.
Yeah. Okay. So, but cattle grazing is about roughly 18%, I would say. But anyway, let's leave that. We're not focused on that. My real question is, can we really afford? I know you've talked about investing like 2% of GDP and all those things, but can we realistically really afford to dump fossil fuel? So maybe, because I think the way I've seen things, it's like everybody's saying the solution is either or. Sometimes the solution is and, right? So is there a way we can responsibly harness, fossil fuel without like shutting it down? Because I can imagine, yes, there is impact on our health on this in 90 years time, whatever time, but today, if we shut down, I can see that already happening. You shut down all these things, economies, people are suffering for it. You shut down all these things. Sorry?
I mean, I think people are suffering already, right? So the existence of fossil fuel means that if you look at air pollution, for example, and climate change costs are well calculated, and people are suffering that. These costs that I'm talking about, the $2.5 to $4 trillion of costs to nature and the cost of the green economy, basically these costs are borne by people already, right? The thing is, they are externalities, so they are invisible. They are economically invisible. They are already reflecting in your health costs, in the costs of products, and in the increase in the risks of society as a result of climate change, water scarcity, pollution, etc., etc. So these risks are already there. Today's externalities are tomorrow's risks and day after tomorrow's costs, right? So one leads to the other, leads to the other. The problem is that we are not reflecting today's costs and not talking about them. We keep saying, oh, what will happen in case fossil fuels go down? Well, what will happen is that people's health will improve. Alternative energies are cheaper today than fossil fuels, right? Yes, we cannot power every grid on the planet right now with renewables, obviously, because it's powered by fossil fuels. The US, as I mentioned, has 19% coal-fired power still to this, despite the success of renewables in America. China has like almost 40% of power of its grid 60% of the Chinese grid is coal-fired power, right? 40% is non-coal-fired power. So today there's no question, you cannot shut off fossil fuels. What you can do is aggressively change policies to reduce fossil fuels as fast as possible, so that the other sources which are clean, and in that I include geothermal, which is hardly developed, I include wave energy. Think about this from a physics point of view. How much energy is there in waves that can be captured at the coastline and is simply not captured because we don't have the equipment to do so? There are numerous coastlines where waves are meters high, and we are not taking advantage of that physical movement that can be captured. So we don't have wave energy being harnessed. We don't have geothermal being harnessed. We have wind that's begun to have some success. Wind energy is quite successful. Solar is quite successful, but then it leads to quite a significant mining impact. And now people are talking about mining in the ocean and so on, which is going to be absolutely devastating if they go that route. So a couple of good success stories are there, but it's not digital as I see it. It's not a question of, can you just stop fossil fuels? No, nobody wants to create chaos, but we want to reduce the costs of fossil fuels as fast as possible. Now, I've been saying this for the last 2002 onwards. Yeah, so the last 23 years, right? So would I have liked to have to say it in 2002 when I started saying this? Would I have liked to have to say it in 2025? Clearly not. And why am I saying it? Because people have just not moved. Why have they not moved? Because of the negative spin that fossil fuel companies, and part of the spin is, oh, but you can't do without fossil fuels. Yes, of course you can't today. But you can do a lot more without fossil fuels today than 10 years ago and 20 years ago, right? And that's the direction of change. Yeah, we need that direction of change.
Gently move to the next question. I know you've got more, Dapo, but because I think it's interesting. It's this piece of the 4 different capitals or impacts that get traded off, right? Is what I'm hearing.
I'll just leave my next point in the chat if you don't mind, Pavan.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What is the next?
Thank you so much. I just want to get one more question in, because I know we have 3 minutes. Sebastian, please.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Pavan. Thanks for your motivating talk. Although your message is also negative, of course. So I'm working in politics, serving as a mayor currently, and I would say it's a bit same. The overall challenges to the local ones, that everybody is quite aware of what we should do, but many people are not willing to do that because of negative effects on their own pockets, on their own daily lives. I mean, that's a statement. I don't know if you would agree. And the thing I would like to ask you is, you showed the UNEP figures like 13, 14 years ago. Any positive changes since then? And can you state some positive examples? I think it was on your last slide where you said many readings about this, many positive stories. So do you see any positive effect going on there? And what's the main hurdle why we are not addressing those topics? Sorry.
Right. There are positive examples both at the corporate level as a microeconomic level, which I've quickly summarized here. There are many, many more positive examples. Actually, the other book that I'd recommend you all read is The New Nature of Business. It's by Andre Hoffman, who's actually the vice chair of Roche. And he gives like much better examples and more recent examples of positive examples of companies doing the right thing and actually making money or reducing risk. Both same thing, right? Today's risk, tomorrow's costs. So that's on the corporate side. On the economic side, the whole green economy report has like 50 examples of positive stories of each of these levers that we talk about in terms of transition from the old style economy to the new style economy, generating value for society and generating GDP growth and adding value. And the beautiful thing is, this is not just in developed countries. Most of our green economy success stories are in developing countries. That's the most amazing thing about this. It's worth reading that old report from 2011, just for the positive examples given there, and to note that most of them are from the developing world. So it's all possible. But to answer your question, you said, why is it not happening? It's not happening because the fossil fuel companies and others who are invested in the brown economy are using lobbying and financial power to prevent it from happening. That is the main and only reason, actually, why we are not seeing transition. It is the incumbents fighting, and you can see that the incumbents have actually taken over a number of political systems, some of which are somewhat powerful, as you may be aware.
Yeah. Thanks. So we should do better in that, but we know.
We have to fight. I mean, it's a war, right? It's a war between the profits of oil companies and the lives of your children. You decide which side you want to fight for. I have decided.
Thanks.
Wow. Thank you. We do have time for one more question, if there was anybody who wanted to put their hand up. Otherwise, I would be happy to ask one.
And by the way, the profits of oil companies are $4 trillion a year, so they're not poor.
Absolutely. Dapo, why don't you? Oh no, there we go. Let's.
Okay.
Is it okay if we spread it out? Sorry, you almost got there.
No problem. No problem.
Emmanuel, do you have a short, sharp question?
Yes, I do have a very short question, but thank you, Professor Pavan. I think you have answered part of my question during your lecture. But so, will it be fair to say innovation is suppressed by, using your word, aggressive lobbying? If we look in
among
terms
other
of,
things, yes. That is correct. But it's not only so. Aggressive lobbying, you're quite right, does suppress innovation. It encourages perverse subsidies to remain and even increase. It prevents good subsidies, which is those which are driving change and transition, from being implemented. As you can see, the decline in support for renewables and so on. So lobbying does all of that. And yes, also it creates barriers towards the entry of smaller, newer players who are using innovation to be able to provide a new business model. But lobbying prevents them from being successful. All of that. So there's a lot of negatives caused by lobbying, and one of them is what you just named.
Anything further, Emmanuel? No. Well, maybe I will just change the topic a teeny little bit, Pavan, if that's okay.
Sure. Yes.
I was really interested in how, the challenge to companies, and obviously there's lobbying, and we talked about, and you talked brilliantly about policy and why it's too slow for what we need. But I guess the being a first mover in this world in reporting on impact is also feels like it has a disadvantage, because you're putting out there your externalities for everybody to see, and until we gain more mainstream and more traction, sort of promoting like Natura has its natural capital or impact, and its social or human. How do you think we get over that? I remember it with caring again. They were publishing their integrated P&L and kind of pulled back from it a little bit, maybe because investors weren't that interested. How do we?
I think Kering is an interesting case because Puma, which was the first of the Kering group of Puma, was bought by Kering after they published their IPNL. They integrate, sorry, their what's the natural capital P&L, NPNL or whatever, in 2010 thereabouts, when they actually used the TEEB report as a lever for doing that. So they found that, and at the time that Jochen Zeitz, who was the owner and CEO of Puma, did that, his board was opposed to it, and lots of people said that you are creating a huge risk and you'll have externalities-based court cases against you and this and that. Nothing. Because by definition, an externality is legal. The legal system permits you to have a negative externality. That is the problem, right? So today's externality is legal, and therefore nobody can challenge you because you are following the law, right? You cannot have a legal challenge just because of an externality. So this is bullshit to say that, oh, if you publish externalities, you'll be taken to court. You can't, by definition, because it's an externality. That's the whole point. Because the law permits it, right? So net result of Puma publishing its externalities, everyone thought it's such a cool brand. Suddenly you find Puma goods suddenly becoming from the lowest level of branding to the highest level of branding, because, hey, these guys, they've done the first IP, what is it called? I forget, So it was like I still remember the time in 2010, 11, I had friends of mine, including my then girlfriend, said, oh, by the way, this Puma thing of yours, I've gone and bought a diving suit from there. Oh, great. I mean, it's like, because there is a storytelling aspect to this, right? Which is to be able to project and present that you are nature positive or you are socially positive. And I think there's a huge value in that. I think what's, again, happening with Kering and so many others who've stepped backwards is that they've fallen prey to the lobbying of the incumbents, the oil and gas companies, and those who promote their agenda. Look, I'm repeating, I don't need to repeat a third time, but second time. There is a war going on. It's not just in Gaza or in Ukraine. There's a war going on globally, which is between the profits of oil companies and the future of our children. And you're all involved in it. You are either on one side or you're on the other. You can't be neutral.
Thank you. I think that's a perfect place to end. Thank you so much. There's lots of comments, not that many questions in the chat, but it's clear it's been incredibly well received. Thank you, Pavan, for all this pioneering work, and thank you for taking the time to go through it so beautifully and giving us all that challenge on which side are we on. I know which side I'm on. With that, we, I think, have been joined by our second speaker, who you know.
I'd say hi to Fabio, and so honored, Fabio, to be on the same panel as you.
My honor very much. Here. Not just your last comments, but they were useful already.
Yeah, and I did mention, although I didn't say much about it because I knew you would talk about it, I mentioned Natura as being one of the examples that I'd written about way back in 2010 when I think at that time you were not working there, but
I had a spy at the call, so I got already the information.
Very good, very good. Yes, excellent. Why not?
Wonderful.
Yes.
It's a great honor. Thank you so much,
Yes.
Pavan.
Okay,
It's
take care. Take care.
amazing.
Bye for now. Yes.
You
All the
too.
best. See you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you. And welcome. Good morning, Fabio.
Good morning.
Nice to see you. Obviously, I will give a little introduction to anybody who doesn't know who you are. I mentioned it at the very top of the session, but Fabio Barbosa is currently the CEO of Natura & Co. and board member of Itaú Unibanco, CBMM, and Ambev. Also a board member of CLP, the Public Leadership Center in Brazil, the United Nations Foundation to support the UN and promote international cooperation, and the former CEO of Banco Real, Santander, Brazil, and Febraban, the Brazilian Banks Association, and Abril Media. Wow. You were in 2011 recognized as Person of the Year by the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce, and then received the United Nations Champion of the Earth Award, which is a fantastic award for your vision and entrepreneurialism. Again, recognized in 2017 by the World Fund for Education for bringing educational values to the very forefront of the Brazilian national discussion. You have a degree in business from FGV in Sao Paulo and an MBA from IMD in Lausanne. I think amazing CV and experience you have. And I guess under your leadership, Natura has become this global example of a shift in how companies are set up and act to the rest of the world, how they serve society and regenerate the planet, as well as generate profits. And so thank you for joining this conversation around really the value of the corporation. And as you know, we've heard from Pavan for the last hour, which has been fascinating. And I'm really excited for you perhaps to talk to me a little bit about, and we will have questions. There's lots of people wanting to ask questions. But I would be really interested if maybe we start with your journey on the leadership shift. How do you go from banking to something like Natura, and how did that journey shape how you think about value creation? We need some light. You're obviously in Sao Paulo. It's wonderful. Good morning.
Thank you for the kind introduction, Lisa. Thanks everybody for sparing this time now for us to talk about important things, which is the values of the companies, the value of capitalism. And I mean, share a little bit my experience, which is long, Luis, because I'm getting old, that's all. It's a pleasure being here also. Remember that, I graduated at GV Foundation. So to me, it's a pleasure also to share and to be on board on any initiative by Getúlio Vargas Foundation. I'll talk a little bit about the journey, but I will incorporate exactly what you're saying here, the beliefs and why doesn't it really matter if I am working in banking or in cosmetics or in media business and so on. The first thing, Luis, I wake up in the morning, there is a purpose in my life for the last 40 years. And I translated that into initiatives I'll talk about, which is you can succeed doing the right things the right way. This is the key sentence that I use all the time. In the world that you believe that if you do not compromise, be it on the legal side or company side or your personal life, you know how things are and you cannot be that strict. Well, I am very strict. And I wanted to be also a reference that there are examples like Natura, by the way, like many other companies present here, many other companies in Brazil, so on. I'll not mention names because I may be unfair with the others not to mention, they are successful doing things correctly. And we always try to pinpoint, oh, this one does not do that one, that guy, and so on. And I think the world needs examples of successful companies doing the right things. And this is, to me, what I said at the beginning, is a hard game, but we aim at the ball and not at the opponent's leg. So we play a fair game. And I started with that when I was at the bank. When I came back from Switzerland, by the way, after spending it was too early in my career, did not mention, but I worked for 12 years at Nestle, and Nestle in Brazil, in the United States, and in Switzerland. And one day I decided, say, no, I want to go back to Brazil. And having seen what I had seen in Switzerland or United States and at Nestle, I said, no, I have to spell it out more, because that's what I believe, that the companies should not be tolerating minor deviations or so on. And it's not the world of that's the way it is. It's not. And at that point in time, I said, okay, we are going to translate that into actions. What kind of action can companies work on which shows the determination that you're really willing to do things the right way? I love a sentence by Ralph Emerson, who says, your actions speak so loudly that I cannot hear what you say. This is about actions. This is not about words. And then I say, okay, what shall we do at the bank that would be considered as, okay, you are really paying attention? So we started, I'm talking about 1998, when things were so much different, and said, okay, shall we be lending money to companies which were, that was a true question, that are cutting forests unduly, or shall we not? And I said, we shall not. And then I went home, and then another company, and we also cut the credit line for those companies. And I said, these companies are not going to be there. I said, first, I don't think it's the right thing to do. Second, is illegal. I'm talking about illegal. And third, I said, if we have a forward-looking, that kind of business will not be there 10 years from now to pay us back. So even if you're pragmatic. And then I did for the second one. And then someone came to me and said, that's not the way to do. I mean, the bank is a bank. We have nothing to do with this. And I said, life was kind to me, very kind to me. And someone called me from the Northeast region saying, listen, I have always worked with certified wood. No bank has ever put a value on that. You guys put a value on that. I want to work with you. And I said, you know what? There are people which believe on the same thing that I believe. And why don't we work with them instead of working with anybody else? And we had this idea, Luis, that you have to be forward-looking. I mean, it's not what you do today. Is where is society going to, and are you going to be prepared to handle what society will be demanding from you, the young population? I'll come back for that in a moment. But I remember I dared to make an adjustment on what Milton Friedman said. Milton Friedman has the famous, the business of business is business, which, by the way, his concerns were much more aligned with donations and things like that, which would give prestige to the CEO. But Milton Friedman knew as well that the value of a company has to do with a perspective of future profits brought up at present value. So can the company, I say to every CEO, Luis, this is not about maximizing results. I'm not very competent. I can maximize results. The issue is to make sure that you have good results this year and you pave the way for good results next year and pave the way for good results, because the company has to be not perpetuity is too much, but perennial. The company should have another. So I think the idea of maximizing results in the short term, and that's a dilemma with the stock market and so on, but it's an issue. And therefore I said, and by the way, the stock market understands that, because the stock market prices, if they see that the business is not going in the right direction, there are competition coming from technology or whatever, they will undercut your price even though you're having good results, largely. So I made a small adjustment. I said, the business of business is sustainable business, because that's what Milton Friedman actually meant. He said, you have to be in business now and for the future, because society is changing and you have to be adapting yourself. You have to pay your tax properly. You have to be building year after year a stream of results, which will be the big value for the company. And then I started focusing on that a lot, and I saw three main trends or stages. Number one, at the beginning, was the people saying, okay, companies should be philanthropy and make donations. I said, okay, that is fine, it's necessary, but that's what Milton Friedman was criticizing, by the way. He said companies should not do it. They give money to shareholders, shareholders do it. But anyway, I have one thing which is more important. I don't think companies are in the business of signing a check and trying to erase the consciousness, saying, okay, I gave money, I'm fine, now all my sins are forgiven. And that's good to do it, but that's not what I mean. I'm on the second one, which is the idea of sustainability, is to do things properly on your day-to-day. Do not compromise on the day-to-day. Do it properly, and you're adding a tremendous value to society. Paying people properly, respecting the laws, looking at the externalities like environmental issues, social issues, inclusion, and so on, which is very important. And now we have the third one, which is the impact investment. We say it's not only doing things properly on your business, but try to do business which by itself have a benefit in terms of inclusion, social inclusion. So instead of having a hospital, for instance, here in São Paulo, you have it in the Northeast, which is a poor region. It still is a hospital, but it has more impact. Of course, right now, many things are being questioned. No? So is that the right thing to do? I mean, you have all the questioning now, especially in the United States and the business and so on. Is this the right thing to do? Is it not? Have we gone too far? Have we not? All the woke and so on. So, but I think there is a demand for thinking that you see the trend. Now, let me be a little bit prophetic here. I don't think this is temporary. The idea of looking into externalities and so on the good side, as Mr. Pavan said a moment ago, is a matter of understanding this is generational. I use a word, sentence in Brazil, I'll try to bring it to the world, but I will be more in Brazil. Said, if my generation did not leave a better world for our children, we are leaving better children for our world. This is so true. I mean, I see a social consciousness by the young population. I see an environmental consciousness, which in my generation, and most people here are much younger, people didn't talk about that. That was not an issue. It was fool to talk about the impact. The ocean is so big, the atmosphere is so big, nothing is going to happen. And now I see people very much concerned. I see them concerned about how healthy are the food. And by the way, I have grandchildren. I dare to drink a Coca-Cola in front of her, and she says, she's 6 years old. Why do you drink that? This is not good for her health. Shut up, Coca-Cola. But it was amazing to see how they go after things which are healthy and so on. I'm not, she's 6 years old, too young, but 13, 20 people, your people are much more conscious. And so I do have, as a generation, I'm not talking individuals. Sorry. As a generation, I see people much more concerned. Therefore, you have to think not on what consumers do right now, what consumers will do in the future. When I see companies looking into saying, listen, the food does not come from areas which were forested beforehand. This is healthy. This company, they do kind of inclusion. This company, they do some projects for health around the region where they operate and things like that. I see that there is a impact on the consumer, and more. I say every day there is an old consumer which never thought about this when taking their consumption, so their decisions, which steps away, out, whatever, nature, they die, they retire, whatever. And every day a young girl comes with a different mentality of what this is all about. By the way, they do that as consumers. They do that as investors. I was just, by the way, I just ran here. I was with an investor, and the investor invests in Natura and so on because he believes so much that as an investor, you can drive the world towards A or B. If you invest in companies which are in this direction, the world will be more like this. If you invest in this, so the investor has a tremendous power of where do they allocate the investment. And I see, especially the young people, I talk a lot to private banks and so on, they want to know where is their money going to. People in the past didn't care at all. By the way, we are living a transition. I'm not saying that everybody does. I'm saying that I see young people saying, okay, I don't want that kind of investment. I wanted that one. Okay, that's good. And third, for you guys, you're very young, and some of you maybe have some management position, is the idea of the talents. People want to know, where am I going to work? When I was graduating, and everybody was graduating, any company paying a slightly higher salary would get the job. Say, listen, I don't care. I can be selling cigarettes, I can be selling ammunition, I can be doing anything, and that would be fine. This was 20, 30 years ago, it was like that. Now people want to know, what kind of business do we do? How do you treat people? What are your social programs? And this was not the case. So if you want to attract talents, be sure that you are connected with what talents are valuing. They are not only looking at the salary, they are looking also at the salary, but they are looking into some other things. So this is what I call a trend which is irreversible, because this young generation more and more will be the consumers, will be the investors, and will be, by the way, the talents. And therefore, I say this whole idea is that it's a world of and not or. I faced in life many things which were false dilemmas. People say, oh, but if we do that, then we cannot. Most of them were false dilemmas, even on environmental issues. When I see people looking at the water consumption, for instance, or looking to diversity as an idea of improving the decision-making process, not only as a something to tick, say, okay, I've done it, but are you really having a complementary executive group, as a board group? Are you bringing people with different experience? People with different experiences will see things differently. So if you look into the environmental impact you cause, this is going to be cheaper at the end. And at the end, I'll come back with this. But this is very important. There is false dilemmas and there are true dilemmas. So there are two dilemmas which we have to face, but let's put the false dilemmas. The false dilemmas are the way which basically say you cannot succeed if you are too strict. You have to compromise. And this is, again, what takes me up in the morning. And to look into it, ethics, which is what I'm talking about here, is not to be something restrictive, it's to be inspiring. I mean, I see people saying, oh, but then I cannot do this, I cannot do that. No, it's not what about you cannot do, it's about what you can do and understand the trends. For instance, carbon market is something which was never thought in the past. Now you have a big market there. Impact investments are demanding investments and companies are doing that. Biodiversity. And there are many things which are working and which have to do with activities which are coming up because of this new standard that you see on the population as a whole, on the consumers as a whole, on investors as a whole. So we are talking about opportunities. We are not talking about a restriction. I mean, it's no good to see ethics. Oh, but then I have to be. You don't have to be. You have the privilege to be working on this. And by the way, I don't know all the countries which are here represented. In every country, you have a minority which has a problem, and you have a majority, normally silent, which wants to do the things properly. But then it's difficult and so on. And we need examples. We need reference of people which can succeed. So this is the thing of what is your role? Your role. When you consume, you're sending message. When you make investments on company A and B, you're sending message. When you talk about accepting a job here or there, you are sending a message. All the time you're sending message. So what am I talking about here primarily? I'm talking, yes, capitalism is the way to build a better society. It's a matter of us playing by the rules, number one, and understanding that if you play by the rules and if you do things properly, actually you're going to be better off and going to be more successful. And I not only say that doing the right things the right way, being successful, doing the right things the right way, but being more successful because you do the right things the right way. And by the way, when you look into this iPhone or whatever, a smartphone, this changed the world. There is no more on and off. You are on all the time, and I love it because companies are no longer perceived by what they say, but they are perceived by how the consumers, the talents, the investors, they say, oh, this company is doing well, this company is not doing well. Look at they did. They said that this car had that and that facility, and it doesn't have, so it goes. I remember talking to a friend not long ago saying, oh, but you saw the advertising, that was 10 years ago, an advertising on that car. I said, I don't look at the advertising. I look at what the consumers are saying about what this car is all about, which of course is much more logical, but that was not possible in the past. So the smartphone finished, no more on and off, which is good. Now, we have lots of things here. How can we measure that? Do you measure? I mean, I saw and I worked on an association on companies and showing the results and so on. Of course, you have many companies which do not do things properly and they are very successful. Okay, so it's up to us to decide. Listen, do I want to invest? Do I want to work in this company? Do I want to be a talent there? Or not. And it's up to us, society, to decide what to value. I believe that there's more people on this side. That Natura is a company which it was not. I was very active when in Banco Real, which became Santander here in Brazil. And during that time, the bank was very active, and people were surprised that a bank, yes, a bank. Of course, a bank has to do things properly. And we were doing things. We have microcredits. We have many initiatives I can talk about later. But many initiatives which show that we were not joking or kidding about that. We meant that this was the way, and we got an engagement by the 98% of employees. We got engagement of the client and so on, because clients understood what our proposition was all about. But then we say, and Natura is a company which is easier because it's cosmetic. Then you're really talking about beauty, about products coming from Amazon. But the company was born on that. And it had its financial difficulties. And it's amazing, which Unilever had this already. And people say, oh, they are in financial difficulty because of the focus on these externalities. And no, it's not like that. Don't let them conclude that. And there's totally dissociated. It was wrong decision making here on an acquisition, which made Natura suffer. But now we are back into track. But the company, the problem had nothing to do with that. But enemies jumped immediately. So you know what? That's a problem. Now, can we measure? I go now jump for a moment into a subject and then I finish. We started doing what they call this IPNL, which is integrated PNL, where you try to measure the impact of the things you do and what kind of impact does it have in society. I mean, it's very raw yet, so I fear giving too much publicity to it, but we do it. We try to say, okay, what kind of impact do we kind of? We have here a company which, by the way, has close to 1.5 million what we call consultants, which are people selling cosmetics and so on. So there's a tremendous impact on their standard of living, on their measures in terms of education, so on. So we measure everything, and then companies say, listen, for every dollar we spend, we get another 2.7 of positive impact. But this number is too raw. I do not want to rely on it. I do not want a publicity on it. I'm just saying it is amazing that the company is measuring this kind of thing and say, okay, what kind of impact do we cause in the world? But then, just to finish that and give you also opportunity for questions or a dialogue or whatever, I say, I've mentioned all the time that we have to be forward-looking. Forward-looking means what kind of society are we seeing in the world? I'm not going to go into the geopolitical situation of this particular day or the tariffs that may come tomorrow. That's not what I'm saying. Talk about values and so on. So I will put up a sentence, and then I will rephrase to make it clear. The sentence is as follows: we will be judged 5 years from now for what we do today based on values and laws of 5 years from now. Okay, that's strange, maybe it's unlawful. So I will rephrase. We are being judged today for what we did 5 years ago with the values of today. So you see companies which are having substantial fines because they operate, they cause some impact on the environmental. It was not illegal. I'm sorry, it is now. You see companies which had many major problems with legislation, labor legislation, so on. Oh, but at the time that I heard, it was not like that. Oh, sorry, it was not, but now it is. I want to be a little bit cynical in saying that, because sometimes people are defensive and say, no, but I'm doing things properly today. It's not enough. Make sure that you do things properly, not only on what it is today, but what's going to be tomorrow. Consumer rights is very much on top of that list. Environmental issues. By the way, environmental now become not only an opportunity, but a risk as well. This is obvious, it's coming. Depending on the country, and in my country, this is an issue of the social inclusion. It's a big issue. What do you do for that? I mean, are you ignoring? Are you working on that? Are you opening opportunities for people which come from lower income class or not? Things are like that. In Brazil, important. Each country has a specificity on the social issues. So I will stay on the consumer rights and the environmental issues, which people will be judged 5 years from now, 10 years from now for what we do today. And then we have substantial penalties. I see it all the time. I don't want to name companies here, but because they cause some harm to the environmental. But they said, but it was not forbidden. Well, it was not unlawful, but now it is. So the message to you guys is believe that you can build a better world and that you can be successful doing the right things the right way. It is not true that the world is questioning that. It's not at all. The world is questioning other things, but being a good citizen, working properly, be in whatever country you are. I'm not in an easy country here at all. We have lots of problems. But what I found that more than 70, 80, 90% of the people I work with, they want to do things good. They want to do things properly. And if we team up and we spell it out, so I appreciate, by the way, this initiative that you're having, Luis, and coordinating here, to have the students and so on to see different views on, is it possible? Is it being questioned? What is being questioned sometimes is maybe on the woke that maybe have gone too far or not, I don't know, but on environmental and so on, I mean, this is a must. And the social inclusion to me becomes, and I am totally confident, I do that not because it's fashionable. I do that because it's the right thing to do and because I see the future and it will be the right thing for my clients, for my investors, for my talent, and for my society to appreciate. So, Luis, thank you for this, for my introductory here. I open up. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I know we're going to get questions very quickly. This was fantastic. I love you can succeed in doing the right things in the right way. One thing that strikes me, I'm just going to ask up front, is around, so clearly ethics is and what is the right thing. And the other thing that struck me was this idea that we have to look to what will be the right thing in the future. Do you think we have a deficit of imagination in most businesses because they are not, seeing that the future will change quite dramatically, and they think they can hold on to that business as usual?
I work with good humor, so my answer will have a degree of good humor. And then I say, people don't like to make movements. Only transportation companies like to make these movements from one place to the other. People like to stay where they are. It's natural. It's very natural. By the way, we were designed millions of years ago and had to spend little energy. So changing is difficult. Now, if you look at people think, okay, things are not going to change because, the horizon that they look at is very short-term, pressured also by short-term results. It's easier to say nothing's going to change. I have seen things changing. I have seen what happened to cigarettes, to plastics. I have seen what is happening now with the oil industry, which, by the way, was a conversation we had. We can talk about that. But the oil industry, these things are changing changing the behavior. Soft drinks. I was created and born on soft drinks. I drank as much Coke as you can imagine, Coca-Cola, to make sure. And and today people it's reducing. They are more conscious. So why? But that people didn't see it coming. And you know what? These people which are 15 years old, which are not drinking, they consume less alcohol. There's a big issue in the world. Of course, there's the income effect, which brings it higher. But in the rich countries, the consumption of alcohol is coming down. Now, you believe it or not, forward-looking is essential. Now, there is uncertainty on forward-looking. What I don't like is when people say this is fashionable or this is not going to change. The world will always be the same. No, the world will not be the same. And you as a company, remember, you are not here. This is one of the most important messages. You are not here to maximize next quarter results. Any incapable guy can do it. You are here to perpetuate the company, or maybe a different word in English, perennize, whatever, to make perennity, something that which can go year after year. It is better. So just on a...
Wonderful. I can see that we have a question from the audience. And if you've written in the Slack or in the chat a question, I can pick it up. I will then pick on you to do it. I see a few people, but Grant, please introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Fabio. Thank you so much. This is Grant from Gibbs in South Africa. My question is, and I don't speak on behalf of every South African, let's make this clear. We've got slightly not contrasting feelings here, but obviously we understand the effect that using fossil fuels and harming the environment has on the environment, the greater environment. However, there is strong sentiment that us as a country, we need to utilize our resources to develop and pull the majority of our population out of poverty. At the same time, there's sort of the feelings that the first world needs to be pushing this and maybe be a bit, I don't know, call it slacken the responsibility on the third world. My question's around Brazil, because I know you guys have got similar challenges to us, I think, a deeply unequal society. Is there a similar sentiment, and how has that affected your business and how it operates? I don't know if I'm clear, but have you been praised by the people in Brazil, or has your praise come from overseas? I'm just curious to see if there's a similar situation in Brazil.
Just a second. Hold on, just a second.
I don't know who that was, but
Fabio. No, that's okay. So first, just touch fossil fuels for a moment. and then I'll go to the praise. Fossil fuels is amazing. I am part of, as we said at the opening, of United Nations Foundation, and we had a fund there. And then there was a discussion once years ago that we should not invest in any company producing fossil fuels. This is a very touchy subject here. And I said, I agree, provided that you do not fill up the tank of your car with gasoline, because this is pretty unfair to say, okay, do not have fossil fuels, but please, I will not invest my funds, but Grant, please, get your hands dirty, invest on it, because I go to an Exxon station and I need gasoline. So I said, listen, this is not the right thing to do. This is cynical. I mean, if you need gasoline, you cannot say that you're not going to invest in the company. I mean, we have to be serious about that, because otherwise the question is exactly that. You're asking somebody else to get their hands dirty because you want your gasoline. So what we decide to do is something different. Say, listen, why don't we are a small investor, why don't we team up with other big investors and we try to have an active position in one of these boards and so on to claim for the oil industry to make and work on transition, because that's what this is all about. A transition, how much are you, I mean, sending to creating problems by producing oil, and how much also the oil you're burning. Now, on the second point, if I understood correctly, the praise and the way people praise us as a company and so on, which is very good, it comes from everywhere. I think competitors try to emulate us. I think investors, the company has for 11 years been the most admired company and has been a very successful company, unless for a recent wrong decision on acquisition, which had nothing to do with the strategy on ESG or whatever. But the company was born on that, and many people emulate. I'm asked several times to make speech, because different from talking, because I'm a businessman, because I worked in a bank, and because I run a company which is very much admired. And by the way, I'm only there at my age, I'm 70 years old. I said I would not be CEO of any company, but a company which I admire. So I'm there not by coincidence. I'm there because, by the way, Luis, answering your question, because I'm there for the values. It doesn't matter whether we sell cosmetics or we sell credit or we sell magazines or we sell oil or whatever. Oil is more difficult. They're more difficult or not, but a company has to do things properly. That's what I'm after. I'm after companies which believe that you can succeed. So we are praised in several forums and so on. People admire, population admire, consumers admire, and we make a living out of this. It's a win-win-win, but we do it. It's amazing to see, Grant, all the initiatives we have in Amazon to collect seeds in order to make the forest yield income for the people living there. And 400 people, scientists discovering new products. I even surprised again, I'm not but we believe on that, and then we do social inclusion on that. Because we have this network of consultants, there's 1,500,000 here in Brazil, we give them some additional income, and by giving them additional income, we are also helping society in inclusion and so on. So, I mean, we could go on and on, but I think I want to be, as a person, a reference on that, and together with many other executives here in Brazil. But I also want the company to be a reference. Thank you, Grant.
Thank you.
Great answer. Thank you. We're getting into the joy of it. I'm gonna jump to Sanjoy. I will come back to the others. I just want to get as many voices in as possible. So Sanjoy, you get to queue jump. There you go.
Fabio, fabulous hearing your passion and understanding, how Natura is leading this change. I have, as a doctoral student of applications of Gen AI in driving sustainability solutions in CPG companies and beauty companies, I was very interested to hear your views. Is there anything specific around supply chain and sustainability where you see the application of this new technology is doing for Natura?
Yes, there is. We look into, I mean, I'm involved in so many things here, but we look into the suppliers very carefully. I mean, once I saw the Toyota, CEO of Toyota saying, our company is nothing more than our suppliers put together. and while GM at that point in time was squeezing suppliers, and that was long ago, and the story showed that Toyota had it right. So yes, we work a lot on the supply chain. We have, I mean, all these communities working, and then we develop. I went there to visit. It's impressive, and then I go to how does it replicate? Okay, which was a little bit your question, but I went there, and you see this community with 50 or 80 guys, which they are not natives necessarily. They are very people living in the Amazon region and making a living on the forest, standing up. And then we buy the seeds, and then we finance them to press the seeds and take some oil out of the seeds, and then it goes to the laboratory, and then they make makeups or they make creams and whatever. Again, it's not my specialty, but I was surprised to see that. And then we say, we want to the concept of scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. You know, the scope 1 meaning what impact do we cause ourselves. Scope 2, what energy we use, and by the way, use only clean energy, which, by the way, Brazil, many problems in Brazil, by the way, and don't take me wrong, but we have clean energy because we have largely hydroelectric plants, and they are called clean energy, and we have alcohol and solar and so on. So Brazil, the electric energy is like 80 to 90% clean. So we use only clean energy here. And then we go to scope 3, and then we start working on our suppliers and working on our distributors as well. And so we are working, and we make sure, because we cannot say we are a clean company or whatever if we do not have a clean supply chain. Okay, and we are working now to make something this. I think, Luis, so you are here, or you will be here, right, Luis, or not?
Yes, in May.
In May. So she will be here. She will be able to testify what I'm saying here. But going back, and then we have all this issue on, okay, what other companies could be using our raw materials or not? What lessons? So we share. We do not make this or say, I'm the only one to be able to explore opportunities in the Amazon and preserving the Amazon forest, which is the big issue for the world, by the way. And so we do that, and we share, and we communicate, and we sell some products and so on, raw materials, but we are developing more and more. It would be interesting, Sanjoy. If you work on that and so on, there's a laboratory. Again, I'm not a chemical engineer. I understand nothing about how these products work, but just a curiosity. I have lots of hair yet. Good. And I'm using a shampoo based on patawa. Patawa doesn't. Now, how did they find? There was a native community which were using this seed to make the hair a little bit softer. And then Natura went there and said, okay, how does it work and so on. And then they make that, and they understood. And they sell this product, and they pay part of this revenue goes as a royalty. Royalty is my word here. So royalty for the community which started because they were the ones to see that that seed could be good for the hair, for instance. So they pay. So it's a very integrated. But the company was born like that, which is easier. Transforming is not always easier. But yesterday somebody asked me on another speech, which what does it take for a company to transform? It demands CEO commitment. Without the CEO commitment, it does not work. But anyways, thank you, Sanjoy. Back to you, Luis.
And I think I've heard you speak about the CEO as a guardian of purpose, right? Before, which again, the CEO has to be deeply involved. We are back to Emmanuel. Your go, and then Dapo, your back.
Okay. Thank you. Fabio? I think I really enjoyed your speech, especially when you started with the quote of Friedman saying that the business of business is business. And just using your quote and using some of the statements you've made, will it be fair if I say Natura, your company, is kind of involved with corporate paradox, which implies that you mentioned about dealing with natural resources from the Amazon. The natural products that you are making at the same time, it's causing deforestation or depleting the natural resources of the Amazon. And you also rely on global chain management that are also part responsible for greenhouse emission. Will it be fair to conclude that your company therefore is involved in corporate paradox, which is preaching one but doing another, which therefore relies on your statement that the business of business is business.
Am I so happy because I can further explain, and I'm very clean on everything you said. Number one, in the Amazon, we get seeds. We do not get trees. People do not deforest because if they deforest, they do not have the seeds anymore. We are only in the business of collecting seeds, which, by the way, if you go to, she'll go there, millions of seeds. Nobody is hurting the remaining of the forest. So it's only seeds. Actually, it protects the forest. So we protect close to, I think it's, I forgot, I have here, by the way, I have a map of Brazil here, and it shows, you'll see that when you go there, Luis, and but I'm not going to look here, but we contribute for the preservation of 2 million hectares with this idea. So it's not like cattle, which you have to cut and put. That's number one. Number two, we only use recycled plastics. So I think close to 95% of our plastics are recycled or recyclable. So we don't use plastics which cannot be recycled. So we reduce it close to zero, okay? And we are bringing it down. I have a whole thing. I forgot that I had it here. And you have 42,000 people impacted by this collection of seeds and 17 industries which are just pressing the seeds. That's all they do. And the communities, 48 communities, which Luis will visit some of them. And so, no, I'm glad I don't have. And we use clean energy because Brazil is basically a country for the electricity is clean energy. And now we are working on the third scope, which is to use the trucks with electric energy or gas, but cleaner energy. So you're working on everything. You know, this company, I did not create it, okay? I am not the one who brought it to the company. So I don't have any merit on that, unless for exploring more and more and talking more and more about that. But the thing is that I have a firm belief that the company is really committed to that. And although there are problems, of course there are problems. If you go there and Luis, oh, you do, but you say this, but you do. But the conviction is that this is our business. These guys, the founders of the company, and with whom I get along, you'll be surprised. They say, listen, we are here to prove exactly what I said here. I mean, these are my words, to doing the right thing, succeed doing the right things the right way, but that's what they believe. So anytime, for instance, there was an issue recently, and some of the goals had to do with recyclable material of the impact of carbon. And we could not at all, we did not pay bonus for the team because that was a strategic, that was 5 years ago, because it was a strategic thing which was not met. I mean, we are not here to sell if we do not reduce the carbon footprint that we cause on it. So it's a beautiful initiative, Emmanuel. I'll be glad that Luis, once you come here, have a testimony that you can share with the people here what you will see, because it's exactly what I love the most. We are not in the deforesting business. We are protecting. We are seeing, by the way, this company is seen as a protector of the forest because we were able to find economic activity for people which otherwise would be cutting the trees. They do not do it. They actually preserve. And it's amazing to see how much they love. Big areas, of course, and it generates a good income for them. Good income, and not only for selling the seeds, but above all now, because they have a complementary, because the company pays them for what you call, I think it's called traditional knowledge, and which I called unduly like it was that you're paying royalties, but it's not traditional knowledge, you pay for them. So it's good. Emmanuel, I'm always inviting you to come here as well.
Oh, there you go. You got an invite too. Maybe I'll just add a little bit, because so in my work, I'm always finding examples of what we call the best business, the regenerative business in service of life. And there's no business that's perfect at all. But Natura is incredibly thoughtful, and wherever you look, there's evidence of that thoughtfulness, which is the basis of being able to do this stuff, because it is both about the environment, it's about the local communities, and so on. So I hope that answers your question. Great. And then we will jump over. We've got 2 more questions, at least. I think we can fit more. I'm not seeing any women ask questions. I just want to put that out there. I think it's very interesting, and I would really encourage more females just to spread it out a little bit. But Dapo, you have been very patient, so go for it.
Thank you. All right. So my question is this. I like what you do today. I like who you are today, the company and all of that. But I'm looking more from a legacy point of view. So really my question is, in a world that, in today's world, where you have companies facing intense pressures to prioritize short-term gain, versus long-term, how do you personally ensure that your values of, sustainability, transparency, and I dare say responsibility remain central to your leadership? But beyond you, because you won't be CEO for life, right? So how do you, embed these values into Natural's, business model so that every team member, everybody who joins Natural, don't just come to work and live for Natural and then go out there and live a different kind of life, think differently and act differently. So, is there something you're doing to ensure that this becomes a real legacy that is passed on from one person to the other, not just business? Like when we come here, this is how we do. When you go out there, you do whatever you like. Thank you.
Very, very good question. And I was for 15 years, I was head of a bank called here Banco Real, which was a subsidiary of ABN AMRO Bank, which is a Dutch bank. And that's where I started doing this. I became the CEO, and that's when I said, I'm gonna do things that I believe on, and I will talk about doing things properly. The way we paid motorboys, the ones which are delivering our mailing at that point in time, or the way we pay for suppliers, and we did, and everything worked out very, very well. And I think there was an issue to me to show that this does not hurt the results. And I was lucky enough, and I say life was kind to me, and I was able to do these things, and the bank's value went up, and the acceptance of the bank by the young population, which again, the students and so on, they love the bank because the bank had the same value that they had. Now, the important thing, and this when I left the bank, because the bank was acquired and so on, it went into a different administration and so on, there was a guy who told me something which I think is the answer for what you said. They said, the people which live that experience, they are like seeds which will go elsewhere and they will flourish somewhere else. And today, I can tell you many companies which have CEOs, 8 companies have CEOs which came from the Banco Real. And then other companies which have a sustainability, head of sustainability or consultants. So many people, they are spread out. They say, Fabio, it's better than what having the culture there because they spread out. They left and they went somewhere else. So that's one thing. The second thing is after a while, people which do not believe in what that goes again for the CEO. The CEO is a key piece on that. As I was the CEO and people understood that this was of important value to me, the ones which did not believe this was important to them ended up leaving. It was expelled almost by, like us, not biological, if you have something which is trained to your body, you expel it, right? And so we ended up having a tremendous consensus on what to do. Natura is more or less the same. So it's not because I'm there or not. It's the culture of the company is there. And you see people, going back to the bank, which I had, at a point in time, there were 51 initiatives, and I knew probably 5 of them because people understood that that's what you want to do. In Natura, it's amazing. All the time you came with new packing, the new transportation, with new ideas on the product and new ideas on the supply chain and things like that, because it's embedded into them. So it's good. It takes time. It takes time. And I cannot say to you that you will not be ruined by some pressure which may come in the future by other, but is entrenched. In the case of the bank, because administration changed, became a multinational with a headquarters in Spain and so on, they were distant. Many people left, but they were working somewhere else. So the culture of sustainability, Luis, you see, is in Brazil very valuable. And to someone who was asking about reputation, how do people praise, is the same. I mean, people do praise that, and they do recognize initiatives like that. So it's a spread out in the country. But it's all the questions you guys were asking, I have only partial answers. I do not have to. So they are good questions by definition. So I do not know, but that's my guess. Go on, Luis. We have another 9 minutes.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, 9 minutes. So we've got Vikas. You have a question?
Sure.
Great.
Thanks a lot, Fabio, for your inspiration. I'm from ESA Business School, and I was lucky to visit your headquarters near Sao Paulo 2 years ago in the middle of nature. Felt really inspired there also. My question is building upon, as you mentioned, that the CEO has the main responsibility to bring that change and have those values. But at the above CEO, there is also the board and the investors. How do you manage their expectations, and how do you set the right communication with the board and kind of bring this change, keeping them on board?
So Vikas, good that you came here, and the company is a very nice headquarter, which, by the way, it let's say it talks a lot about the culture of the company, the open space and the middle of the woods and so on.
Absolutely beautiful. Yeah.
Good. And by the way, I've seen many companies in the United States, they have nice headquarters in the middle of the woods. That's not the case in São Paulo. They always have buildings. Now, today is almost an exception on that. But first I'll say quickly, and I'm being philosophical again, the CEO is key for the following reason, then I'll answer your question. I am convinced that the vice president and directors, they look at the CEO and they said, what does he attach value to? Because what the VP wants, the director wants, is to be promoted, is to get job stability, to get a bonus. So the smart will smell right away, say, okay, that's this guy. So if the CEO does not believe all we are saying here is important, they will not do it, because they will not guarantee to them a better future. The whole philosophy here, Luis, is that people do what is good for them, full period. It's up to the board to make sure that when you set goals, if people achieve those goals, you are building the company you want. Because sometimes people will achieve the goals, but you are not building the company you want because it was through shortcuts and things like that. But anyway, so the CEO is a vital piece on that. Now, the CEO, of course, has to reflect what the board thinks about that. And the board has to have a belief on the fact that we are building something which has a forward expectation, good expectation of future results. So the board has to be aligned, and because the board gives the guidelines and or the guardrails for you to do your strategy. So the board has to be aligned. Now the issue goes to the investors. And the investor, what we found is that there are investors, and again, who praise that, investors who do not. Okay, this is a beautiful world. I mean, people are everywhere. I just look for my group of people which thinks alike. So I appreciate, by the way, I was supposed to be at 8. I was not here at 8 because I was talking to an investor who has a long-term perspective and who believes on all those things. So there are investors which praise that, especially when you get younger people, but there are investors which do not praise that, and you cannot make everybody happy. But the board of the company, I work in a company, most of the companies I worked for had founders which had the influence on the board, and they say, okay, we want to have board members which believe on that, and executive which makes this happen. And so I was lucky. There are cases when I really believe, I said, you know, the best thing you do is do not try. If the CEO does not believe, and if the board does not believe, I mean, being here at the very low level of the organization, trying to change it, it's very difficult. So to be very honest, it's very difficult.
Thank you.
Again, an imprecise answer. I have more or less 8 or 10 imprecise answers. Go there for the last.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for your time.
All interesting and inspiring. Altaf, thank you I saw lots of comments from you, and I was saying maybe we get a question, please.
Okay, it's a quick question, and thank you for your presentation. What advice do you have for companies facing pushback against ESG and global values in the current wave of anti-woke politics? And how do they stay true to their purpose today and still thrive over the next 5 years, considering all the bullying?
But this is a very difficult question. I am as determined as you can see, so I do not yield to any of these pressures. I just believe that they will pass because I see a new generation with totally different values. Now, the pushback in the United States is more serious, okay? And I honestly, this is a difficult answer, and there's going to be another imprecise answer. But I think on the woke, I think we may have gone a little bit too far, honestly. So it's like it goes like this and it goes back. Unfortunately, putting environmental together with that, where the pressure is much, much smaller, and the consciousness of the problems that it reflects that is happening is much, much bigger. So I see very little pushback on the environmental issues, although there are some. I see more on this idea that you should hire people just because they have a different background, different race or whatever. And this, I think, in my opinion, it went too far. Now, let me explain what I mean by it. I was fighting for diversity, but why? And this will be difficult for me to explain to you guys here, but normally I get something like that. This is alcohol, by the way, for cleaning the hands. But you guys are always the same perspective, no? But I will do it this way now. You guys are always the same perspective. What do you see here? You don't see anything. You don't know what I'm handling. And we all agree, including all of you, we agree, say, Fabio, what is a ridiculous product which has no brand and we cannot know what this is all about? If you don't have someone here where I am with a different point of view, to argue and say, listen, they say it's alcohol for cleaning the hands, which is this one. So diversity has to do with having different people with different points of view in order for you to better describe this. And we cannot describe it properly if all of you are sitting in the same place. And by the way, we would all agree, this is ridiculous product. Just throw it out, or we cannot. It doesn't have a brand. How can we sell it? And we all agree it would be fantastic. Okay, done. Next subject. We need people. So I always was fighting for diversity on the idea that it has to be people with different points of view. By the way, it's easier to accept people for different race, different sexual, whatever. My vocabulary in English is not very rich, so I don't even know how to say different sexual orientation, whatever the right word. I don't know. But my issue is having people with different opinion is much more difficult. By the way, today, the world is totally irrational on having people with different opinion. And what makes a good group? Bill Clinton made a speech once. I don't remember anything he said here in Brazil. But at the end, he said, how good it is to have a group of people which think alike and how inefficient and you it's not good. Why do you have a people who think like you? But it's good. You go, we talk about the same thing, the same soccer team, the same values, but it's not good. So in life, I for instance, I'm not a guy which is very much detail oriented. I always had someone around me which was detail oriented because I know is a blind spot on me here, and therefore I need someone to complement. So a good group is a group of people complementing. So Atala, it's difficult. I say you can say I'm very determined, and I was very lucky. Life was kind to me. It's the third time I say that. Life was kind to me, and I was able to fight for my principles and have them succeed, and I did not have to compromise. Again, I gave you a little bit of a space here to say I think we went too far on woke because we are no longer looking for what I was describing here, but we are looking to say and to please the people. Say, see, I have here different people and so on. But are they really different? Do they really have different backgrounds? Do they really bring to the company the best description of what I have here in front of me or not? And more on that. So, I mean, when I studied at IMD in Switzerland, my professor said, a good question is the question for which there is no answer. If there is an answer, it just reflects the ignorance of one of the parts. So one is ignorant, the other is not. So he asked, the other replied. I was not able to answer any question here properly. They are very good questions, but I appreciate the provocation and made me reflect also on something. It also enhances me when I say that. Thank you very much, Liz.
Oh, thank you so much, Fabio, and thank you for taking this whole hour of your day. I know you're incredibly busy. I just on your last answer, I think it's amazing. You're saying we need diversity of thinking, but we also sometimes need to be with the people who share our values so that we can strengthen and be stronger. Right. So I
different opinions, but same values.
Yeah, exactly. Different with same values. I think it's been incredibly inspirational. So thank you so much. And thank you. I'm very, very much looking forward to visiting next month.
Thank you all. Thanks for the attention and thank you for the opportunity. It's great.
Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye for now.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
I just need to wrap up, Nanshi, for a moment. Very fast.
Right.
I wrap up the session. Luis, yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Sorry, Fernanda. I think Louise has 10 minutes just to have closing comments before you wrap up. Apologies.
And no. That's okay. No problems. Wow. Thank you, everybody. And seeing someone from my country, as I'm also Brazilian, sharing the story of Natura, I need to say that I'm a little bit jealous of the ones that have already been there and seen their operations, such as Vika's, and I've never been there. So it's been like such an enlightened conversation, and oh my God, such a purpose behind a man and a purpose behind a leader. And this is something that we should pursue on our daily basis, to be better citizens and be better leaders, and to spread out this good roots. So thank you very much. Nancy, do you want to? I no longer see the slides.
Fernanda,
Wait.
Luis will summarize what.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So
Okay. Sorry.
How lucky you are
I'm
to
sorry.
be able to
We still have 10 minutes for this session, Fernanda. So Louise may want to give us her thoughts and a summary. Yes.
Oh, of course. I'm sorry. I see here being 3 already. Sorry. I'm sorry, guys. Go ahead.
One of the business leaders who are working as very, very aggressively in this area. She is one of the experts. So she could have been the speaker, presenter. So maybe I appreciate that Louise actually sharing your thoughts and your insights, your experiences. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tomo. Thank you, Fernanda. I won't talk for very long because obviously we've had these incredibly impressive leaders coming to the subject from two quite different angles, and I think we've learned a lot. One of the clear things is that the current or the traditional mainstream model of value creation around shareholder returns is clearly no longer fit for purpose. We must move to different kinds of value. And interesting to hear Milton Friedman quoted in this session. I thought that we still hear people say the business of business is business. And I've heard but we have models like the B corporations, like Donut Economics, like Pavan's Corporation 2020 are opening up some of those new possibilities. And I guess that's what my work is how do you help that transition, which Fabio spoke to as very difficult if your company hasn't started from this point. But I think the purpose and the core of having purpose in there, doing as quoting Fabio, you can succeed doing the right things in the right way. And for me, part of this course and this module that you're all attending is the examples that you're hearing, that this is happening across the world more and more, and some of the best examples are in front of you. We need to embed purpose. We need to make space for nature, redefine what value is, and think longer term. And if we think about metrics and how does that work, but we can support it. And as Pavan said, we have all the data here. It is, in his view, it's just the strong lobbying from those benefiting from the status quo that are holding us back, which I think is really interesting. Is that really it? Is it really a lobbying thing? And yet, the message we also heard was that the policy changes and regulations are taking too long. What we didn't talk about was ecocide, which is a movement coming to put into criminal law if we damage the environment. And companies, Europe is about to adopt these laws across the world. I think 72 different legislations are about to make it a criminal offense to harm the environment. So that's a really interesting piece, whether this will push us forward. We talked a lot about what is the kinds of value, and Pavan's idea that financial, human, natural, and social must all be positive. That's what I would call a regenerative business, a business that is in service to life, where we are aiming at creating not just the short-term profit maximization which I think Fabio also talked about, but what are the conditions for continuing that flourishing in the environment, in society? I thought one of the things we didn't go deep on, but I thought was interesting, was those dilemmas. And I saw it a lot in the chat. Is there really a dilemma between dialing down fossil fuels and allowing people to live good lives in certain countries and parts of the world? And we have to keep finding that balance, but we have to be very wary of thinking it's one or the other. The fossil fuel industry would have us think there's only one. If we turn it off or dial down fossil fuels, this will be at a human cost, and we are holding back. So we have to find out, how do we explode those dilemmas that are false. The only other thing I would say is that we had a lot of talk, and of course, Fabio, being a CEO, of what is the role of the CEO. And it's both about the strategic vision, but also about the systems thinking he is doing and the purpose he is holding for the entire company. So how do you continue that? We've just seen, and we touched on it, we've just seen Natura come up against some real financial difficulties because of the acquisition of Avon, which hasn't gone as well as everybody hoped. And immediately the press are saying, oh, this is because they're doing too much sustainability. So you have to be incredibly strong to build that. How are you incredibly strong? You build a diverse team of people who have the same kind of values as you. And again, it's about radical collaboration across the company, and even as a CEO, with your board, with your team. So I think, there was a couple of questions to, are you greenwashing? Are you saying one thing, doing something else? And it's just a reflection that this is not easy work. And in all the companies I work with, none of them are perfect. None of them, because they're partly all stuck in having to provide investor value and shareholder value, even if they know they want to move to a much broader definition of value and look at all of it. This is where the pressure is. So we have to really think about that. We have to not judge too harshly the people who are the front runners, I would say. But at this point in time, we need transformation, we need imagination, curiosity, kindness. And we heard, we saw the humor in both Pavan and in Fabio, that we have to tell the stories with all of that kindness and humor in order to have more people understand that this is possible. I think that was what I would say. Redefining corporate value, moving, as you've gone in this course, from shareholder primacy to stakeholders, but actually even further to look at it really holistically is absolutely essential. So that's where I would stop. And then I would ask Fernanda to take over and wrap us up. I will write some notes on this. I hope that was okay, Tomo.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Louise. Such a beautiful ending of session. Thank you very much. And for the next session, Nancy, you can change the slide already, which will happen on April 10th at 1. Now, I remind you all that we are on the European summer time. So it's going to be at 1 at CEST. The next session will be about the business of value creation in an age of sustainability and well-being. And we will have as speakers joining us, Christian Haller, the CEO and Value Balancing Alliance EV Vice President of BASF, co-chair of Sustainable Finance Committee to the Federal Government of Germany. We will also have John Elkington, the founder and chief pollinator at Volans, proponent of the triple bottom line. I think all of you guys heard about it, and the author of the Tickling Sharks as his most current book, and the facilitation of Professor David Veredas, professor and associate dean of sustainability, Vlerick Business School of Belgium. And that's it for today. Thank you very much for all your participation, and hope to see you all on our next session. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Luis.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wow.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a nice
Very
day.
good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you
Luis.
very
Bye,
Thank you very
everyone.
much, Luis.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great
Bye.
question.
Everybody, bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, Fernanda.
Thank you,
Bye.
Fernando.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you very much. Nice to